Meeri Durand is an accredited professional planner who has worked with small and rural communities, primarily in the Southern Interior. She's currently the Manager of Planning, Development, and Sustainability for the City of Castlegar, where she leads the city's strategic initiatives associated with housing and climate action. The city recently completed both a housing strategy and social and economic well-being assessment to ensure that the housing that is being built meets the unique needs of all residents. Meeri is here to speak with us today, and we're so grateful that she is. Welcome, Meeri.
Perfect. So let me get started. Before I get started, I'm going to start with our housing needs report. But before I do so, I just wanted to acknowledge that I certainly am not the brains behind the operation. We had the same project team from Resilience Planning work on our housing needs report as they were also the same team that did the city's housing strategy the year prior. So the city initiated our housing needs report before the province introduced the housing statutes. So part of the reason we did this is that our initial housing needs report was based on 2018 data, and it was relatively outdated, and it wasn't reflecting what staff and community partners were actually observing on the ground. And so prior to initiating the city's community plan review, we determined we required an update. And we wanted to align that with the rollout of the 2021 census data so that we were working and making decisions based on the best available information at the time. And so I would say that we actually launched the housing needs assessment and our community planning review, or the background work associated with that, at approximately the same time. So we had two project teams working concurrently. Some of the key findings, and I'm sure this is replicated throughout the province, especially in smaller communities like Castlegar, we're a community less than 10,000 in population, is that we had a significant oversupply of 3 to 4 bedroom units and a significant undersupply of 0 to 2 bedroom units, which was only 30% of supply. In addition, at the time, the city had not issued a building permit for multifamily for over a decade. So generally speaking, even though these numbers look really, really high, when calculated against the oversupply of large units, it ended up we identified a need for 464 new units by 2026. So some of the key considerations for the city in terms of our meeting those housing needs and filling that gap is, in the Kootenays, we do have a lack of skilled trades and labor for multifamily developments. Most of our trades are used to doing spec homes, so the large 3 to 4 bedroom single family home type builds don't have a lot of comfort or specialization for larger. In addition, most of us who live in the Kootenays realize that we have a bit of a added cost to materials, and that's primarily because of our isolated location. So cost for materials and for labor is about 20% higher in this part of the province than elsewhere. So it's very narrow margins for developers to meet pro forma targets and make projects financially feasible. In addition, what we were observing in the city of Castlegar was we were having an observable increase in the number of unhoused in our community and growing socioeconomic gaps. Similarly, though we hadn't issued building permits for multifamily in over a decade, I would say we made up for that with a focused development of greenfields in the community, and again, focused on those single family larger dwellings. Actually, before I go too much further, I did want to just speak to a few things for consideration, especially specific to smaller communities. And so when you're approaching your housing needs report in smaller communities, what you'll find is a lot of the data available to you is suppressed because of the smaller population. This is specific to rental data because CMHC doesn't collect the information for communities less than 10,000. In addition, communities less than 10,000 don't have access to funding to do point-in-time counts. So for those of you who are from smaller communities, I would encourage some creativity in terms of working with your community partners to identify that suppressed data, as well as undertaking annual or biannual rental scans just internally. So you can get a better understanding of what your rental rates and vacancy rates are in absence of that data. So that was an important detail I wanted to share, mostly because I think it is a lot more challenging for smaller communities to put these housing needs reports together in a meaningful way. Our community plan review, which was initiated concurrently with our housing needs report. I just wanted to acknowledge again, I'm not the brains behind the operation. I'm just the driver. So we have a fantastic team still working on that project. We have Michael Van Housen from Michael Van Housen Urban Planning and Design. We've got Fraser Blythe and Amy Clark out of Selkirk Planning and Jonathan Schmidt out of Blue Rock Planning. So I'll premise this is that the city purposely did not project our community. We didn't focus on 20 years into the future like most community plans do, and as we're required to do under legislation. Part of that decision-making is we launched this process very shortly after the pandemic. It was felt that the community wasn't ready to think that far into the future with the level of uncertainty that we're seeing on a global scale. There was also during our engagement process with the community, a lot of the wildfires occurring and just a general uncertainty in the air. So we wanted people to think more immediate than 20 years into the future. So in terms of community engagement, it was the most ambitious that the city's ever undertaken in its history. And I would say that we exceeded all engagement targets in that. And what was great is it started a conversation that aligned really, really well with the province's direction in terms of the SSMUH legislation. And it really got people talking about the type of housing that they wanted and would accept in their own communities. We were really lucky in that in our case, it did demonstrate that there was a lot of support for diversifying the housing type in all our neighborhoods, and very strong support for duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and low-rise apartments throughout the community. And that the community wanted to see infill supported over greenfield development. So like I mentioned before, the city historically has been primarily growing through greenfield development and this kind of urban sprawl on our periphery. So this slide is really just to say a lot of where we are today was through luck. This city proactively updated its housing needs report. As part of that process, we asked our project team to provide us with forecasting up to 20 years. And that's because we were intending for that information to be used directly as part of our community plan review. Again, because the province hasn't released what the specifications are for those housing needs reports, we do anticipate that we may not be in complete alignment, even though we are projecting 20 years into the future, and that we'll probably have to go back and make some tweaks to our numbers. In terms of housing needs, and I've spoken to this quite a bit, it looks like it's a lot larger than it is. And if you look at I guess it would be your left hand of your screen, that is because it's showing in oversupplying those 3 to 4 bedroom units and in undersupplying the smaller units. So as part of the community plan review, we did our analysis of supply and demand. And then the project team looked at proposed housing types to address what those housing supply gaps would be. So the project, there's several ways in which you can predict rate of infill. So in our case, our project team used an analysis of existing parcels using land use, lot coverage, number of vacant land parcels, and servicing capacity to come up with anticipated number of units that could be realized with various policy directives. The other method of looking at this would be looking at your replace ratio. And what I mean by that is looking at the age of existing residential structures. And then you can look based on what the market turnaround in terms of sales is, and then the redevelopment potential. So knowing that a house built in the 1970s or earlier will have a higher ratio potential of being redeveloped into the type of housing you want to see. So this is quite a busy table, but it's really intended to provide the public with a easy to access information on what their zoning or proposed land use is and what kind of dwelling units we can expect on those. We have, as a city, made a decision to make our new community plan very graphic versus very word heavy. And part of that is recognizing that our community is diversifying and there are language barriers for some people in terms of their understanding. And in general, most people, even the average day person, doesn't really understand plan speak per se. So we're trying to make it as easy and as accessible as we can with this newest community plan. So in terms of housing solutions, we looked at a variety of housing types. So as you can see on the left-hand side, looking at both attached and detached accessory dwellings, row housing, up and down duplexes, as well as low-rise apartment buildings. And based on that, that project team has given a number of total units anticipated, and then which ones were already in queue, sorry, something in my eye, and then what the net difference would be. So I'm happy to say that just yesterday, our team here at the city issued a building permit that gets us to 250 new housing units within the city since 2024. So lots of those are under construction right now, which brings us within 54% of our housing target. And that's not even counting to the end of this year. And we still have 2 years to go to try to make up that difference. So in terms of what we're anticipating or moving forward on now is our community plan has not yet been considered by council. That draft community plan, some of which I just presented to you, will be making internal and external review rounds with community partners and then released to the public in April. We've also been concurrently rewriting our zoning bylaw to bring it into alignment with our official community plan. So here at the city of Castlegar, and I'm sure I'm not alone, is that our zoning bylaw is mid-1990s creation, even though there's been several iterations of our community plan since that time. And it was never updated to be in alignment with those community plans. So when we initiated these projects, we did them all concurrently. So everything moving forward would be in alignment and simplified for developers. In addition, the city created a development incentive program, which was adopted in 2023. And we're just about to roll out an accessory dwelling unit program, which will be ready for rollout when the community plan and zoning bylaw is adopted in June. Part of that program is to really focus on that missing middle and basically in alignment with the SSMUH legislative changes, and to kind of just provide support, recognizing that a lot of that infill development will be driven by homeowners that don't have the expertise to do it in isolation. And so part of that program will be staffing up over the interim to provide those supportive services under our building department. Some of the challenges before I wrap up is, of course, parking. It is always going to be an issue, especially in communities that are traditionally low density residential. In smaller communities and big communities, access is a big one for accessory dwelling units. So if you're looking at detached accessory dwellings, if people are wanting to put those in their backyard, that has implications for operations in terms of snow plowing and snow removal in the winter if those laneways aren't prioritized traditionally. Again, financial barriers, because small scale missing middle is often driven by homeowner redevelopment. It does require, a good investment, and financing options for accessory dwellings are very challenging to get from banks. And so, the average person doesn't have 150,000 sitting in the bank to roll out creating these units. The biggest one for us as a city is uncertain growth patterns. I think, and I mentioned it earlier, it's really hard as planners to forecast population because there's so much uncertainty in terms of geopolitics, as well as for British Columbia, climate events that could have substantial shifts in mobility with our resident population. Mobility and amenities, and how you can do balance investments. And the biggest challenge for us in City of Castlegar, so I have a staff person on leave, so I am planning department of one again, is organizational capacity. And for smaller communities and even big communities, how you're going to pay for the work that the province is going to require to us, of us as municipalities, on this 5-year cycle of updating housing needs reports, then updating your zoning, updating your OCP. It doesn't leave a lot of room for other competing priorities. And what we've noticed is it's getting really difficult to coordinate things on a regional level. So as a city, we did a housing needs report. Ours is updated, but our regional district and other member municipalities in proximity to us, their housing needs reports are a little bit older. And so there's not a lot of synergy there to understand the nuances of peripheral development and growth as well. And then just where to fit in other project work on this cycle. And that is just to indicate that I'm optimistic we can do it. But it is going to be quite challenging, I think, for many of us moving forward.
Thank you so much, Meeri. Great information and great presentation. I'm going to open the floor to questions. Lots of really great points. I think a lot of folks can relate to the planning department of one or or few, and how to resource the work that is going to be happening over these next few months. We have a question from Randy, who was our presenter last month. He asks, Meeri, did you say if you are holding off on your draft OCP and zoning bylaw until the province provides more guidance this June or July on OCPs?
So that's a great question. And so I actually just before I answer that, wanted to say we did just bring a fantastic new planner onto the team who hopefully will make us a strong team of two. In terms of the hold off is, so because the city had already launched our community plan review prior to the province rolling out the legislation, what it had in terms of impacts to us is our timelines had to get slowed so that we could integrate those changes into those documents. So I would say that we were already headed in that direction with those draft documents, but we had a significant delay anticipating the province rolling out the legislation and wanting to make sure we were in alignment before we adopted those documents and then had to start all over again. So it did put us in a really great situation as a community. I would premise, however, that our project team or consultants, of course, weren't super stoked to be put in a waiting pattern. I'm sure all of you are aware that consultants are very, very busy. And we're very fortunate that our project team hung on with us for the ride. But I would say it delayed the project and adoption of those documents by a good 6 months to a year.
So thank you so much. Sebastian asked if you could please provide more information on your development incentives program, and Aaron kindly added a link to the development incentives brochure in the chat. So this is the beautiful thing about the collaboration of the GDN network. I'll end up with one last question before we get into the larger group discussion. Jeremy asks, will your ADU program involve any new incentives for ADUs?
So that hasn't gone to council. Initially, that ADU program was going to provide a per door grant as an incentive. What we're looking at now is less of a financial incentive and more of a waiving of fees incentive. And that's primarily because the city was not successful in some grant funding that would have gone toward that project. So we're now scrambling, looking at other external sources of funding to carry that through. And we made the determination that the province, with its program for secondary suites, is already providing a pretty good financial incentive. I think what we're looking at more is the waiving of building inspection fees and providing that one-on-one support through additional staffing.
Great. Thank you so much, Meeri. We have some more upcoming Gentle Density Network sessions. Our colleagues from Kelowna are coming in April. Date to be confirmed, so please keep an eye on your emails about that. And finally, we want to know again what you think of how this last year has been and what we can still provide in supports for you, the Gentle Density Network members. You're over 160 members strong just in planners on this network. So there's definite need for some kind of connection, and we want to make sure that we're doing the best for you. So let us know what isn't working with the GDN sessions. Does lunchtime work? Does Wednesday work? And our Gentle Density Summit, we had our last one in January and did really had a great turnout. We're doing the next one next February. So let us know feedback about what you'd like to see there, what would bring you there if you weren't able to make it. We hear from the people who came, but not necessarily the people who didn't. And it's important for us to find out why people weren't able to come. So that is open till Friday, and the QR code on the screen there is your access to that. And one very last thing before I let you all go, I've got 3 minutes, it seems. We want to be able to continue the conversation. We are launching our Planners Forum. The Planners Forum is a place for you to connect with each other outside of the Gentle Density Network webinars and continue bigger conversations. There's lots of different discussion space for affordability and for the beloved infrastructure and parking question, one of my personal favorites. So please, there's yet another QR code. Please join in to the conversation and take advantage of some excellent resources, and let's start really connecting with each other to share what we all know and what we've all learned. And that, folks, is a wrap. Meeri, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you everyone else for joining the call. There were over 30 of you here, and we appreciate you taking your lunch hour to spend some time with us and to contribute to this conversation.